I'm Doc Schneider. I'm the chairman of the Mercer Press. I'm the chairman of the Board of Trustees of Mercer University. Let's face it, I'm the chairman of everything. And those of you who don't know me, boy, are you in for a treat. What a turnout. What a great turnout today. Look at this great big room. I know many of us have been here. We've not seen a crowd like this ever, in my view. I think we have something between 75 to 100 more folks here today, and they all came to honor our pal, Bob Steed. Bob, we're so glad you're here. This is a day of love stories, a love story of a community for Mercer, a love story for books and authors, a love story for Mercer and the McAfee family, who've gathered to celebrate the release of the wonderful new biography of Jim McAfee, written by our own Dr. Scott Walker. We celebrated that book last night, and we're so pleased to have Carolyn and Tom and Julie and the McAfee family with us today for this celebration, this continuing celebration. And of course, today is a wonderful love story of Mercer for Bob Steed and Bob Steed for Mercer. And it's a celebration of the love story as well of Bob and Lou, told so poignantly and with lots of half-naked pictures in Chuck Perry's love poem to Bob entitled The Best of Bob Steed, with a biography and substantial extra stuffing of funny columns by Bob. I hope you will pick that book up. It's great. The love story of Bob and Lou was really touching to me. Lou recounts how Bob would follow her around in 8th grade, batting his eyes at her, or fluttering his eyes at her. You can imagine, right? And she noted that she couldn't understand his interest because she said her mother was very strict and had not allowed her at the time to shave her legs. Bob observed that she looked like a tarantula. But somehow, that could not stop the love story from unfolding. A love story, when you read the book, true enough, Lou went to Wesley, and Bob, who was bound to parts unknown, decided to come to be at Mercer, to be near Lou, and that ends up bringing us all here today. This event today was invented by Bob Steed, and 25 years later, it's growing strong. The greatest promoter of the event has been Bob himself, and folks came in droves to see Bob take this podium year after year, but never a drove like today. And okay, Bob, you love Mercer Press, you love Mercer, well, we love you back. And today, this turnout is just a small thank you for all you've been and are for your beloved alma mater and its small little press. And thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in the program, we usually introduce a few special guests. And I want to start today with some little guests. And I want to introduce you to my little friends. Hang on here. I don't know if you can see these. I know it's far away for some of you. But these are, I think this is what bobbleheads were invented for, to be a bobblehead. I've had these with me for years and years, but this is the first time I've taken them out of my pockets. In addition to these little guests, you'll see that you also have little guests of miniature bottles of Bushmills Irish whiskey that we have in honor of Bob. Bob loves Irish whiskey, and it's part of what made him a jolly little fellow all these years. And speaking of jolly little fellows, these are the ones I want you to get to know. I know it's hard for a lot of you to see it, but this is going to be a collector's item from here to Hayhira. Believe it or not, and this is the honest truth, these little fellas were hand-painted individually in Changping Town in the Duan province in China. I kid you not, and they come to us today like we three kings from Orient are. Now, I want you to picture a room full of 50 Chinese artists over in the Orient, busily painting Bob Steeds, trying to get them done for this event. I was fumbling around in the basement, and I came across a Dale Murphy bobblehead. I said, perfect, that's what we should have, a Bob Steed bobblehead. And I surfed the net, I found a company, I got some pictures of Bob, I drew some stick pictures, and I ordered up some Bobs. But I learned this is the best bobblehead maker in the world, and each doll was a work of art, individually painted by Chinese artists, and they're just all a little different. They're still very much Bob, but they're all just a little different. Now, they couldn't make me as many as I wanted. They could get me some by December 6th, but not as many as I wanted. I entered into negotiations in Burma for the delivery of for 50 of the little Bobs by today, but there are 200 more behind them. So here's what we've done. I've given one little Bob to each member of the Steed family. They're in those little boxes. When I gave Bob his little Bob, he burped him and fed him a bottle of Bushmills, which resulted in the doll riffing off a series of one-liners that had the rest of the bobbleheads laughing to the point of incontinence. And then we've taken the remaining dolls, still wrapped in these little boxes, little tight sarcophaguses, as a matter of fact. And there's one on every other table or something like that. And there's a little pink sticker, and if you find that under your plate, that little bauble is yours to take home with you. I encourage you to, as the event goes forward here, to go ahead and open those. Did somebody throw theirs away already? If you have that little, flick up your plate, if you find that sticky note, go ahead and unwrap that, pass it around, let folks take a look at it, and let people take a look. And I know that every couple here is going to want a little Bob, and as I said, 200 more Bobs are on the way. In fact, they're in tiny canoes, stroking their way across the China Sea, scheduled to hit landfall later this month. The little Bobs will be available for order through the Mercer Press. If you want one, just send your email address to Alan Wallace. That's wallace_am@mercer.edu, and he'll let you know when the Bobs get here, and you can order one for your very own. And don't worry, they're going to be cheap. After all, they're made in China. All right. Now, having taken so much time with our little guests, let's move to our special guest. There's no applause needed, and in fact, none is allowed. Let's just do a little wave and be fine. Let me just take a moment to take a nod to our special guest. Bill Underwood and his wife Leslie are with us today. Bill, Leslie, wave if you would. No applause allowed, even if mandated. The Mercer University Board of Trustees, those who are on the Board of Trustees, raise your hand, and glad you're with us today. Thank you for being here. What a wonderful year at Mercer, with record enrollment, rising SAT scores and GPAs, and great events on Mercer on Mission and Mercer on the athletic fields. Last time we were here, Mercer had not gone to the NCAAs, but they did. Yeah, how many of you knew that? And they beat Dan Willoughby's Duke Blue Devils. Can you believe it's amazing? Just what will happen with a little bump from the author's luncheon. I'd also like to recognize collectively the members of the University Press Board. If you just raise your hand and say hello. Thank you, guys. Glad you're here. And I want to give special thanks to the press staff, and particularly to Marshall Luttrell, and I'd like each of you to stand, and Mary Beth Kozowski, and Jenny Toole, and Candy Morris, and our director, Mark Jolly, because I know that all of you were up all night pulling this thing together, as you always do. Thank you very much. For them, this is like getting the same tooth pulled every year, but they love it. They really love it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one of the books that we're featuring this year is a Mercer Press release of a biography of the famous and legendary basketball coach, Lefty Driesell, written by Martin Harmon. And I hope you'll get yourself a signed copy. It's a good read. As fate would have it, Lefty's daughter, Reverend Pamela Driesell, has become a fan of Mercer Press over the last several years, been with us at many of these luncheons, and we're lucky enough to have her today to deliver our invocation. She's the senior pastor of Trinity Presbyterian Church in Atlanta. Pam, I see you coming up. There you are. Where are you? And I know you'll give her your attention as we pause to give thanks and then enjoy our lunch. Reverend Driesell. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Actually, the program says I'm giving the invocation, but the truth is we do not have to invoke the presence of God. The holy is always in our midst, but through prayer we open ourselves to that presence. I invite you to pray with me. O gracious and very present God, you who are the source of all life and love and every breath we draw, you who by the word created order out of chaos, we come to you now as we gather today to celebrate the creative power of the word. And it is good and right that we should stop and thank you and praise you for the gifts of this day. We thank you for the authors who have labored so hard and now have a finished product to share with the world. We ask your blessing upon their words that they might bear good fruit. It is good and right that today we celebrate and thank you for Bob and Lou Steed, for it was in Bob's imagination that this event was first born, and through their continued sustained commitment that it still continues to grow, and so we thank you and pray your blessings upon them. It is good and right that we thank you for the opportunity to share good food and good friendship around a table. And so we thank you for these good gifts and to ask your blessings upon them. And even so, as we leave this place, we also pray for the grace to remember that not all your children have good food to fill their bellies, good books to fill their minds, or good friendships to fill their souls. And so make us extraordinarily generous people to share these gifts with the world that you so love. We pray in the name and the power of love. Amen.
Let's have a big round of applause and thank you for Steve Rotz, our choral director who's playing the piano, playing over there from Woodward. Outstanding. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce our president. I'll make a few remarks. I have a little video for us, and then we'll get to the entree, which will be our speakers here today. And I'm going to call them, when I do, in the order of appearance that they appear on your program, with Dr. Godsey, and then Nancy Grace, and Steve Penley, and then Chuck Perry. Last night, we gathered many in this room for dinner, and Dr. Godsey was giving some beautiful remarks. I think he was at the close, maybe a sentence or two away, when the fire alarm went off, and it said, "Clear the building, national emergency, everybody run for the hills." And Dr. Godsey looked at me, and he said, "I think I'll wait for the chairman to take over." I came up, and that's what happens if you go over time today. The same thing will happen. The same thing will happen today. But I'd like folks to try to spend about 5 minutes or so when we're talking, but we'll see how we do. If the moment moves you, keep on going. I'm always honored to introduce our first speaker today, our president, who's done so much so fast and become so beloved by all of us. When I see his Lincoln-esque figure striding to the podium, or across Cruz Plaza, or past the Diane Owens Gardens, or in the shining confines of the Drake Fieldhouse, or even in the well of the Griffin Bell boardroom, I know good things are on the way for Mercer. That's how it's been every day since Bill got here in 2006, when we wrestled him away from Mercer and turned him into the biggest bear of them all. In a remarkably short period of time, Bill has become tied to every bit of our history, from Jesse Mercer to Kirby Godsey to Judge Bell to Bob Steed. He is part of the fabric around here. We're lucky to have Bill as our president and Leslie as our first lady, And on this day of days, this big Bob Steed Day, I give you Bill Underwood.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.
Doc came up to me right before the program, and he said, Bill, I'm serious about that 1:30. He said, I've got a 3 o'clock flight, so I'm not sure why he emphasized that with me, but I think what he was telling me is I've got a choice of either talking fast or saying very little. My wife will tell you that I'm an expert at saying very little. But today I'm going to try and combine saying very little with speaking very quickly. This is our Mercer commercial moment in the program, and we've got a lot to be proud of this year. This year, 3 Mercer students received prestigious Fulbright scholarships, the most in 1 year in the university's history. The most prestigious scholarship available to undergraduate students in the sciences is the Goldwater. For the 2nd year in a row, one of our undergraduate science students received a Goldwater. There were only 3 universities in Georgia who have had a Goldwater the last 2 years, us, UGA, and Georgia Tech, and we've had Goldwaters 2 years in a row now. A Mercer senior was named a Woodrow Wilson Fellow. A Mercer music student won the most prestigious international cello competition and was thereby recognized as the top collegiate cellist in the world. 2 Mercer student athletes were named first-team academic All-Americans, both baseball players who competed on a Mercer team that ranked among the top 25 in the country. Enrollment's booming with a record 8,557 students enrolled at Mercer this fall. More Georgians today are educated at Mercer than at any private university in the world, and we're proud of that. We enrolled our largest and best credentialed freshman class in the university's history, nearly 45% larger than the freshman class 3 years ago, while also improving selectivity and increasing the average grade point average of entering freshmen to over 3.8. I tell our faculty that if the students keep getting smarter, we're going to have smarter faculty. And they tell me we're going to have a smarter president, too. With booming enrollments, we need more space. Since last year's Authors Luncheon, we've completed a music education facility for our world-renowned Center for Strings, a new medical education clinical facility in Macon, a new student housing complex, a new theater and arts center, and have begun construction of a medical education research facility in Savannah. We've announced plans for an additional $30 million undergraduate science center in Macon, a $20 million pharmaceutical sciences facility here in Atlanta, and we'll break ground next month on a $40 million student housing, hotel, and restaurant complex in Macon. Over the past 25 years, Mercer has been an emerging major research university. This past year, externally funded research expenditures exceeded $30 million, including research that is being applied to change lives around the globe. We've now fit more than 3,000 landmine victims and other amputees in Vietnam with a new patented, highly functional and durable prosthetic designed by faculty and students in our biomedical engineering program. More than 3,000 landmine victims. Scientists in our environmental engineering programs are developing and implementing new and effective ways to bring clean water to people living in rural areas of sub-Saharan Africa. Mercer chemists and biologists have developed and tested protocols to protect gold miners in Mozambique and South America from mercury poisoning. We've become a part of the Atlanta Technology Village, where we have Mercer scientists working to commercialize their work, and Mercer has been admitted to membership in the Georgia Research Alliance, a consortium of the leading research universities in the state. We anticipate that this coming year we will become the 3rd member of the Georgia Research Alliance, along with Emory and UGA, to also be admitted to membership in the prestigious Phi Beta Kappa organization. A faculty member in our Center for Collaborative Journalism won the National Edward R. Murrow Award, the Pulitzer of Broadcast Journalism. Mercer football completed its second year and its first season of competition in the historic Southern Conference, the conference that spawned both the SEC and ACC, by winning 6 games and averaging more than 10,000 in attendance per game. We became the first university to self-produce live television broadcasts of every home football game, with student journalists working with ESPN and through our newly acquired television station, WMUB. And there was something else in athletics, too. All right. None of this would happen without a great board. Doc asked the trustees who are here and the past trustees to raise their hand. Kirby and I have both been blessed with the most supportive, encouraging trustees you could possibly imagine. That's not the case at many trustees, and there's no doubt that the support and encouragement we receive from our Board of Trustees is a great part of our success. And we've also been blessed with great board leadership. I told you last year that we had broken through the ultimate glass ceiling when we named Doc Snyder as our current board chair. Doc is, of course, the first Yankee to ever serve as a chair of the Mercer board. And he follows in the footsteps of other great board chairs, of course, 2 of whom we're honoring this weekend, Jim McAfee and Bob Steed. Both have had biographies now released and published by the Mercer Press. Make sure you pick up a copy, make sure you purchase a copy of To Make a Difference, James T. McAfee by Scott Walker, and The Best of Bob Steed. Bob, I didn't know there was a best. Without their leadership, we wouldn't be where we are today. So as we look to the future, we've established some pretty bold aspirations for our university, and I'd like to briefly show you what those aspirations are. Would you all show this video?
Our founders didn't just dream of what Mercer might be. They defined a clear path for our future. We believe in religious and intellectual freedom. We make a positive difference in the lives of individuals, communities, and the world. We dare to go beyond the expectations of others. We have emerged as one of the elite private research universities in the Southeast. As we look to the future, we simply ask, to what shall we aspire next? what shall we aspire next? With you, we will expand our capacity to teach, to learn, to create, to discover, to inspire, to empower, and to serve.
What a great video, what a great goal, what a fantastic job Mercer has done over the last 30 years in just changing the face of that campus, changing the face of its vision. I think we also got to see today for the first time what Bob Steed would look as a yes man. You know, he's bobbing his head yes, or he agrees with everything up here, as you see. I want to thank all of our authors who are signing books today. We have 13 great titles this year, and there's a program at your seat that lists each one of them. Everyone will make a good holiday gift. They're going to go back to the tables after this event and sign, so I hope you will rush the tables and buy lots of books. We're here today to celebrate good books, to celebrate 25 years, and to celebrate 35 years of the press. But most of all, to celebrate you, Bob. We're going to have 4 speakers here today, and I'm going to let them talk about Bob and why we love him. And I'm going to keep my introduction short and Ed McMahon-like, as close to, and here's Johnny, as we can get. Everyone knows our speakers. They literally need no introduction. We're going to hear from Dr. Godzi first, Bill's predecessor for nearly 30 years, a visionary leader of our school. Then from Nancy Grace, renowned prosecutor with a program on headline news known all around the world, and a novelist and an expert on the American criminal justice system. And then Steve Penley, an iconic artist, original as the Garden of Eden in my view, an artist discovered and nurtured by Bob Steed. And then lastly, Chuck Perry will take us into the book of Bob. But before we get to all that good stuff, I thought we'd go back in time just a bit and rewind a few belly laughs with Bob Steed. Because Bob, there's never been an MC or a guest speaker like you, and there never will be. So let's take 10 minutes and roll some tape.
Someone introducing me one time describing me one time, said he's not exactly fat, but he does have a tendency to bunch up when he sits down. So, another young lawyer one time refused to debate me, saying that he was not going to debate someone who had spent 25 years growing his own podium. So, thank you, Monica. I found myself a bit intimidated being up here with real writers. As Monica says, I am a lawyer, though there's some dispute about that, even within my own firm. Judge Griffin Bell, who is sort of Ayatollah Khomeini, contributed a blurb to the back of my last book, Lucid Intervals, which said there's a raging controversy as to whether Steed is a writer or a lawyer. The lawyers, he said, claim he's a writer, and the writers claim he's a lawyer. He wound up by saying the only certain thing is that he's written far more than he's read. So I can't really explain to your satisfaction, I'm sure, exactly why I'm chosen to be in this very good company today. I always have this dark suspicion that it's because Louis Grizzard wouldn't come unless he was paid. Like Emily, I'm a great friend of Louis. I wouldn't say anything rude or ill of Louis Grizzard. I hold him in awe and admiration. Awe primarily because he's one of the few University of Georgia graduates that I know who can actually write sentence after sentence. Many of them containing both a noun and a verb. people, there's sort of a rumor abroad that Lewis and I are feuding, and it has to do with my most recent book, which is Money, Power, and Sex, Self-Help Guide to All Ages. Mercer University Press, $12.95 hardback. Available at good bookstores everywhere. Or for 2 or more, I'll come right out to your house, apartment, or double wide, and sign anything in there you want me to. But Lewis contributed a blurb to the back of the book, to the dust cover, and a blurb, I'm sure as all of you know, is one of those monumental efforts where writers perjure themselves in other writers' behalves. And Grizzard's blurb on this book was that Bob Steed knows as much about money, power, and sex as Boy George knows about testosterone. He may have been retaliating for a review I did of one of his books sometime back. I just reviewed Shoot Low, Sheriff They're Riding Shetland Ponies. But the first book I reviewed of his, and was at his request, was one with that wonderful literary title. It sounded like it came out of the Kenyon Review, called They Tore Out My Heart and Stomped That Sucker Flat. And I said that I thought it was a marvelous book. I enjoyed the read. It was put together very well. It detailed his heart difficulties, both clinical and sentimental. And clinical, any of you who've been face to face with some gimlet-eyed surgeon about 2 or 3 payments behind on his Mercedes can appreciate. I've got one doctor friend that who defines unnecessary surgery as performing an operation when you don't even need the money. But in that review, I said that I found the book flawed in one major respect. And that was, for those of you who recall Lewis's most recent heart difficulties, and those going back to the days which were the subject of that book, he had a faulty congenital heart valve that had to be replaced, and I think Ali would go along with this. They hemmed up this Duroc hog out at Emory and slaughtered it and took out the heart valve. Don't know if they checked it for worms or not, but Lewis has been acting kind of funny since then. And they took out Lewis's valve and put the pig valve in Lewis. And what I wanted to know and said in the review was, what became of the pig? He didn't say in his book. Well, I found out at a cocktail party at Emory one night what happened to the pig. While they were operating, they had nothing else to do. They took out Lewis's old valve and they put it in the pig. And the pig, as you might imagine, underwent something of a personality change. Pig, in fact, now wears glasses, little mustache, gold neck chain, open front shirt, Gucci loafers, hangs out at singles bars in Atlanta, and is actually writing a newspaper column under the name of Ron Hudspeth. Unlike Emily, I was not given anything to say or any suggestions as to what I might say, and I don't know what that says about what was expected of me. But preparing for this thing a long time ago, at least on the way from the office, coming over here, I was trying to, hoping for that a surge of blood would reach my brain, and thinking about what to say at a library gathering. Well, I thought a logical thing to say would be first to read books, and I leave you with that advice. And better than that, to buy books.
Here is Bob Steed. Bob, good luck to you.
This is the victim right here. My God. Being introduced by Don Keogh is a lot like accepting an automobile ride from Hosea Williams.
An admired young stewardess came up to me at a cocktail party gathering not too long ago, and with literary astuteness I thought marvelous in one so young. She said, "I think you're one of the funniest men I've ever seen." And those words had barely fallen out of her lovely lips when my wife interjected, "If you think he's funny now, you ought to see him without his clothes on." that same vein, a lady told me at a social gathering that I reminded her a little of Irma Bombeck, and my wife promptly said, well, if you saw him in a bathing suit, he reminds you a lot of Irma Bombeck. Most recent assault I heard on my ego came just Sunday at the ABA General Practice session. I was introducing Louis Grizzard, who gets paid for this. And someone asked my wife, I was standing by, if my book had gone to my head, and she said, no, believe it or not, his head's always been that size. When she gets tired, and she doesn't very often, her mother will pitch in. I have a letter that my mother-in-law sent to someone else, but it was about me, and she said in the letter that it was particularly refreshing to see how much faith Bob has in himself, particularly in these troubled times when so many people believe in no God at all.
Well, this will stay up a minute so you can see what's on the way from China. That was great to see those clips. I remember those jokes, Bob. I know you told them so often, and and I've stolen, I think, all of them. But let's get to the heart and meat of our program, and begin with Dr. Godsey. Come up and tell us a bit about Bob. Dr. Godsey, come on up. I'm not going to call you.
Thanks so much, Doc. Bob Steed, in many respects, made Mercer a better place, and Mercer made Bob Steed a better person. And Bob Steed needed to be a better person. Bob came to Mercer and made it his mission to break all the rules, to belittle all the traditions, and to raise hell with every decision made by the administration. He poked fun at the Baptists and often offended the friends of the university with his irreverence and disrespect. Now, it was tough to educate this young renegade. He came to Mercer from Bowden, as you all know, which Bob describes as being dangerously close to Alabama. Bob also said that God created Alabama so the Georgians would have somebody to look down on. When he came out of the Mercer learning machine the first time, he still had a few spots, so we had to put him through again, and this time he came out a lawyer. And the university issued a blanket apology to the profession, but his partners at King & Spalding said not to worry, he was not lawyer enough to hurt. So they stashed him away in the bond department where they thought he could do the least harm, thinking Bob was safely tucked away there in this obscure suburb. The world could rest easy, but it was not the case. He started writing occasional rock columns of humor. I prefer occasional humor columns, but occasionally there was humor. There were lots of columns. And then those were in the Atlanta Constitution. Then he started writing books, some of which I regret to say actually carry the imprimatur of the Mercer University Press. In the process, Bob managed to embarrass his colleagues at King & Spalding, to insult every citizen of Cobb County, and mercilessly to ridicule his lovely wife, Lou. Furthermore, he created a firestorm among Baptists, at least among those that could read. And frankly, as president of Mercer, I didn't need any help when it came to making the Baptists mad. His books literally became legendary for their absence of intellectual value. Some of the titles, lucid intervals in which there are very few. Mail fraud, which is a fraudulent piece of work. And I want to tell you, if you are utterly devoid of anything useful to read and want to find one of these books and can't find it, don't worry. Call my colleague Emily Myers. She probably has 2 or 3 boxes of them left in her trunk. She used to give them away to donors that we'd given up on. In spite of his irreverent humor and obscure practice of law, Bob grew up to be a trustee of the university. It was a bit of a challenge getting Bob on the board. His wife, Lou, had surreptitiously installed him as a member of the Methodist Church. That didn't go well with the Baptists. They balked at the nomination. Actually, the Baptist barons had to choose among 3 nominations which we gave them. So I put him on a list with a reprobate Roman Catholic and a Jewish liquor dealer. And they reluctantly chose Bob. But miracles abound. This young boy from Bowden, despite all of his irreverence and foolishness, grew up to become one of Mercer's most important trustees and a historic chair of the board. He, along with Tom Watson Brown and Emily Myers and Alan Wallace, conceived this idea of the Authors' Luncheon, and it has been a wonderful success, as you are evidence of today. In truth, no one has ever served the university with more grace and distinction than my dear friend Bob Steed. Underneath all the nonsense and the banner which Bob and I have exchanged over the years, and of which I've always been on the short end, I might add, Bob Steed has made a powerful difference at Mercer because he combines an extraordinary intelligence with an extraordinary sense of humor. You have to be brilliant to come up with all this nonsense. This rare combination of intelligence and incredibly winsome relationship with his colleagues, as well as with great writers and artists and prominent citizens, made Bob not only a lifetime, but a legendary trustee of Mercer. I close with simply a personal word. In my 27 years at the helm of Mercer, I never knew a more loyal advocate for Mercer or any person more committed to Mercer's good future than Robert L. Steed. He brought a keen mind, a gentle spirit, and a stress-relieving sense of humor. So I'm happy to be among you to salute my dear friend and colleague, Bob Steed. Bob is 6 months my junior in age, but I will be junior to his wisdom and his counsel and his voice of civility and his thoughtful caring forever. Bob's generous friendship made me a better president, and Bob Steed made Mercer a better university. Bob, I love you.
Thank you, Kirby. All right, Nancy. Where are you? There you are. Come on up. Nancy Grace definitely needs no introduction, and I will give her none. Here's Nancy. Good to see you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mr. Steed. What an honor and a privilege it is to be here today. When I went to Mercer University, I'm a double bear, undergrad and law school. My greatest accomplishment, however, is meeting my husband, or as I refer to as my current husband, at Mercer University. When at law school, I would hear the name Bob Steed whispered and mentioned in the halls, and I said, "Who is Bob Steed? Who is he?" Well, I finally met him at some Mercer function, And I promptly began dropping his name whenever I could at the courthouse or at any legal function that I knew Bob Steed. And in fact, as the months progressed, I imagined that we had become great friends and put him down as a recommendation and all sorts of things like that. He was the one that, I don't know if you remember, tried to talk me out of becoming a judge. And I want to thank you for that advice, because I would have been a horrible judge. That was at a time when there were very, very few female litigators. A lot of female lawyers, but very few made it to the courtroom or were allowed to be in front of juries. And I recall at my law school graduation in 1984, we had our very first ever Mercer University hooding ceremony, where you got your hood to indicate that you were, in fact, a JD. And a man spoke there. And I had certainly never heard a lawyer speak in that manner. It was Bob Steed, 1984. You hooded me. I don't know if you remember that or not. And I realized, to a tiny degree, that he was neither of the legal world nor the writer's world. Or, better put, he was the consummate lawyer and the consummate writer, both to whom, of course, I aspire to be. He inspired me to go on and try to become a litigator, which I did. My first case was a shoplifting at Kmart. And I'm sad to report that nothing was stolen. And it was a very short, pale little guy, shorter and even paler than me, and he had tried to steal a CD player by stuffing it down his pants. And it walked up and down the aisles through the Oriental rug division of Kmart with the, how can I put it, bulge in the front of his pants. Finally, when he reached the front of the Kmart, he left it in his buggy. He didn't steal anything. He was still thrown down on the floor and pulled back in by the security, and I had to prosecute that. Now, that was at a time when women still believed they had to dress like men in court. And I remember that day that the air conditioners went out in the Fulton County Courthouse, and I had on my man tie, my Joseph Banks blue suit, because I could not afford a Brooks Brothers, and I gave it my all. I had my hair on top of my head. By the time it was all over, my hair was down here, mascara was down here. I had long gotten rid of the man tie. And over the years, I recalled Bob Steed, and I realized that to be a good lawyer, I didn't have to dress like a man or be like a man or be anything other than what I was. And through the years, although you may not know it, Mr. Steed, you have inspired so many, because you are the original, the uncut edition, the real thing. And I want to thank you for inspiring me and so many other lawyers to be ourselves and to do always what is right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. He is the original, and so are you. And for another original, Mr. Penley, where are you? You out there somewhere? I figured as much. Come on up, Steve.
I even wrote a speech.
That's great, perfect. Glad to have you. One page.
It's quick. It's going to be really fast.
Take your time, don't worry.
I'm going really,
I've called the pilot.
really fast. Well, I've been given a list of things not to say, and it was pretty much everything I had to say. You know, it's bad if you're too inappropriate for Bob Steed. But I have to tell you in full disclosure, my wife's attorneys have notified, and I just saw one of them on the way in, have notified recently my attorney said I suffer from a number of personality disorders, OCD, PMS, obsessive compulsive psychotic rage, and everything. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm not the most well-balanced, spokesman that you'll ever hear from, I guess. But what those lawyers did not realize, David, is that these disorders were qualities that you have to do a job like mine. You have to be a little unstable. But, when I think back about my life and everything that's happened, it's amazing the impact that one person can have on a city and on a life, and especially mine. And if it were not for Bob, I would be on a piano delivery truck in Macon, Georgia right now. And that's nowhere you want to be. So Bob, thank you for saving me from that. Bob taught me a really valuable thing in life, because I was kind of worried about my self-image and what impact I had on the world. And he said you can always, no matter what you do in life, you're not completely worthless. You can always serve as a bad example. And I have done that in every area of my life, every aspect of my life. And so I know no matter how pathetic and what a loser I seem to be, I'm doing good in the world. So thank you for that, Bob. He's given me a lot of wisdom along the way. But when I met Bob, I was broke and homeless. I was recently out of Georgia. I'd been at Georgia for 10 years until my fraternity brothers did an intervention. And they said, Steve, you've been living in the house 8 years now, and it's time you move on. Then they found out I hadn't been enrolled in class for 3 years. And so they made me leave Athens. I had no idea what I was going to do for a living. I was really in panic mode. So I moved to New York for a little while, and with a friend of mine who had a trust fund. And so I always tell my kids, find friends with trust funds. And so we went through that money really quickly, and so I still had not figured out how I was going to make a living. So we came back to Atlanta, and I was living in all these old fraternity brothers' basements. So I was broke and, I say, homeless at the time. But now, after meeting Bob and having his impact, after years of hard work and just really busting my ass and making sacrifices, I'm still broke and homeless, practically. I won't go into why. A few bad decisions along the way. But when I first met Bob, am I over time yet, Doc? Am I okay? Okay, do you have a cane? So there's so many things I could say about it. It's almost too much. But when I first met Bob, I was living in the basement of my friend's house, and I was bartending at a restaurant. And I got my start in art in Atlanta, but by a friend of mine from high school said, Steve, I'm opening a restaurant, and I need about 10 or 15 paintings to cover the walls. And I said, great, when do you need them? He said, Friday. I said, oh, crap. But it was fortuitous that he gave me that little bit of time, because I had to think of something to paint fast. And so I picked historical icons, and Bob came in to eat lunch at this restaurant not much longer after that. And I was at home that day, and they called me and said, there's a guy in a Rolls Royce here, and he wants your phone number. And my first thought is, I hope it's nothing of a sexual nature. I would have gone, but this would have been a kind of unpleasant. And then, oh, by the way, I want to say about Nancy Grace, my friends don't believe that that's me that you're talking about in that book. So I got to get some kind of verification on that, because I brag about it and nobody believes me. About the art, you know what I'm talking about. Nobody ever believes me about anything. But where was I? Oh, I was at the restaurant. Bob came in, so he called me. And so Bob and Lou asked me to come over to their house and meet them, and they wanted to talk about doing some artwork. I was thrilled. And so I went over to their house. It was a bizarre house. And I've never, I'm from Macon, Georgia. I'm kind of cloistered away. I've never seen the more eclectic side of the Buckhead culture. And I walk in, there's this kind of rotund little man with a black turtleneck on and this big bushy head of white hair with glasses about a foot thick or foot wide. And and then it's just a real, and they were I didn't trust people like that. And he had the stack of Playboys and everything. I was thinking these big guys might be some kind of swingers or something. And so I never let them get between me and the door. Just had this crazy look in his eyes. As time went up, I realized that I was probably going to be okay. I didn't think he could move fast enough to get me. But he asked me if I would do a painting of his wife, which I sure, I'll do anything for $1, even now. And said, sure, I'll do it. And then, so I did a painting of his wife, and he asked me how much I charged. I said, I hadn't really thought about it because, I was so broke. And I said, I don't know, maybe 3, 4. And Bob was thinking, no, that's kind of steep. But he didn't know I meant 100. And I'm dead serious, man. And so he upped that price up, and then I painted all of his children along with that. And it's a good thing I came into Bob and Lou's life because all his children were kind of disappointments. So it's kind of good I came along. I did. Anyway, and recently, Josh, your dad's made me executor of the will. I took him to the lawyers the other day. But it's not going to be a problem. I'm going to be very generous. And so, anyway, where was I? Oh, so anyway, from I was at his house, and then from there, that went so well. They had that. There were a few issues along the way. I had to fix a lot of teeth and things like that, but it went pretty well. And so I pulled it off, and I had like $1,000, and I thought I had all the money in the world. And Lars and Bob, we went on the biggest beer drinking Chameleon Club tear, every night for about a week off that $1,000. It was a great time. But I need some more money, so Bob asked if I'd do a painting of Alexander King and Jack Spaulding. And and then I love lawyers. I'm the only guy you'll ever meet, my friends laugh at me, that I love lawyers and politicians. They're my targets because I see them as, they're always attached to more rich people. And I love rich people. They're my favorite kinds. Especially people with like airplanes and Sea Island houses and all that kind of thing. And so I'm a predator, so I can smell money. But that's another reason I like Bob. He seemed to attract that. Bob's got this addictive personality. He's fun to be around. He's not as nice as y'all think he is. A lot of people think he's this really nice guy, this nice old man. He's not. Bob sees people as scientific experiments. He sees it. There was a time in my life where I was dating 2 different girls, and neither of them knew about the other. And so they had a dinner party, asked me to dinner, and invited both of those girls just for the fun of it. It was one of the most tense nights of my life. And it was so uncomfortable, and Bob and Lou were loving it. And they just love it. They still love to see me suffer, and it doesn't matter what the consequences are, as long as they can. Lou likes to tell me what stupid things I'm doing and what I should have done, and Bob just sits there with smiles. And so they're not really good people. But what they say about family, and I consider them my new family, unfortunately for them, and that you got to take them for what they're worth. And so, but really, Bob, going back to oh hey Jack, I haven't seen you forever. So anyway, that's another old man from the past. But when I think about the impact that one guy can have on a life, and so many lives, because I know everybody has a Bob Steed story, all those people that think he's such a nice old man. But I could never say with enough emphasis the impact he's had on my life. He really, all the things I say, I tell people that he is completely responsible for my career, and it's absolutely true. And Bob, I want you to know that you can take credit for everything I've become. You can, really. And so, but Bob, I love you, and I'll never be able to thank you for everything you've done for me. And I do want to talk to you about a personal loan later. But thank you very much.
Yeah, there you go.
I wanted one so bad.
I think I need to frame this set of notes for that speech. It's perfect. Thank you. Steve, that's beautiful. I remember you in your homeless days, visiting you down, and we used to play some guitar together. We need to get that back happening again. All right, let's close out with our author. Chuck Perry spent 40 years as a publisher and a news guy, and he founded Longstreet Press, but his greatest claim to fame is he's Bob Steed's big pal, and he's written really a lovely book about Bob. Chuck Perry. Thanks, Todd.
Steve, there's a couple of guys out back in white coats who want to talk to you. Yeah, okay. And to all of you who brought your books over to have them signed thinking I was Bob Steed, I apologize. I was asked to write a brief introduction to the best of Bob Steed. That's a lot like being asked to open for the Beatles. You let the crowd find their seats, the techies check the sound, you perform briefly and then get the hell out of the way. And that's really what this book is. It's a brief introduction about Bob and Lou's wonderful story and their wonderful family. But even that simple assignment was difficult because they seem to have been everywhere and done everything. And it's hard to, I used to tell people in the newspaper business it was my job to decide what did not get into the newspaper. And that was really an issue here, trying to keep this from being as thick as a Pat Conroy novel. We wanted to keep it something somebody could read. So, and of course, then there's Bob's professional career, where he specialized in billable hours. Despite all his jokes about how dull bond attorneys are, that's actually very difficult, detailed work. And it's really hard to describe. So I didn't. I just left out that whole part of his life. But it's very true that Bob's work is reflected in sewer systems and public buildings and new roads all over America. Other people's name may be on the facade, but his work is underlying all of that. We're very fortunate, though, to have a lot of Bob's writing preserved because he wrote for the newspaper and for other magazines as well, as long as they made contributions. And all joking aside, I think you all know that any money Bob ever made writing always went to Mercer. So there was a generosity behind all of it. But unfortunately, that collection of writing, as wonderful as it is, it doesn't include the thousands of one-liners and retorts that came from just being around him every day. If you spend any time there, you know what I'm talking about. I want to share a couple of my favorites. We were gathered around a bunch of old men having barbecue one day at lunch, and one of our party was regaling us with stories of his amorous youth. And he said he had been to a wedding where he was he got hooked up with a bridesmaid and night before the wedding, and he said he was just on the floor, grunting and groaning like a hog in slop, and just having the best time, getting rug burns on his forehead and his knees. And somebody said, well, what did she say? In an instant, Bob Steed said, she said, why don't you get up here in bed with me? And, you know, that's the kind of retort that only Bob Steed could come up with. So it's become a one-liner with our group from now on. It's, why don't you get up here in bed with me? There was another fella one of our circle, who had recently decided that Ball was not beautiful, and he decided to get a toupee. And when Bob saw him the next time, he looked kind of askance, and he turned over to his associate and said, the only way that would be more obvious is if he had a chin strap on. again, it's an instantaneous response. And then another one day we were on the golf course where I spent many wonderful hours with Bob and Brother Mike and David Boyd. And we were all standing around waiting to tee off. And Bob went to a cart and put several pills in his hand and popped them. And it's just a moment, everybody was looking at him. And he met our quizzical stares and said, "It's Viagra. I take it so I don't pee on my shoes." So those are just daily life with Bob Steed, and those are not memorialized anywhere until now. They are. Those of us who were lucky enough to know Louis Grizzard and Bob in the years they ran around know that Louis stole often and from Bob and from Mike. In fact, Louis would steal from anybody, but he made that, he was such a great storyteller, he then made that material his own. And Lou, of course, is a bottomless pool of humor, much of it unintended. Her malapropisms and invented words provide a lot of inspiration for Bob's essays, but she also provided a great laugh or fright for Bob one night. If I'm retelling, I hope I'm telling the story right quickly. They were in London having lunch at Harrods, and Bob said they had been together for 3 or 4 days, and he had run out of things to say. So he just casually looked across the room and said, "Look over there, it's Rudyard Kipling." And he said, Lou just kind of looked and said, "Oh, yes, okay." And he didn't think anything more about it. And that night, they're at some big formal dinner with a table setting for 16, and all up and down the table, everybody is very proper and prim. And in a moment of silence, Lou offered up, "You'll never believe who we saw at lunch today." And so Bob said he was for one of the few times in his life he was speechless. He just turned white. He said it was like watching a car wreck and you couldn't look away. But I would like to leave you with one thought after having the great joy of working with Bob and Lou to prepare a little bio for this book. I'd like to leave you with one thought. What if Linda McElroy Steed is actually the great and powerful Oz? If so, she's created a masterpiece. Bobby, we love you and are glad to be here to celebrate you. Thank you.
Wonderful, Chuck. Thanks so much. What a great event. Bob and Lou and all the Steeds, we do love you. Mercer wouldn't be what it is without you. This event wouldn't be what it is without you. And I'm just glad to be here to honor it with you, be able to tell you we love you. And this day with this memorable crowd, I hope you'll remember. And as Lou said, I'll probably remember all the details. She always thanks me for having a pornographic memory. And with that, I hope you will, if the authors that are here will go out back to their tables, we'll get everybody lined up, and you can go back out and buy some books. What a great turnout, what a great event. And from the bottom of our hearts, and with this round of applause, Bob Steed, thank you.
Bob, we love you at Mercer Press, and we appreciate all you've ever done for us, for the Authors Luncheon, for everything you've contributed to us, and for making us smile and laugh. Bob, we appreciate your sincerity as a human. We love you.
Hello, Bob. Bill Curry here. It was such a joy to see you last night and to see that great smile is still intact. and I have so many memories of your wonderful humor and spirit and the goodness that you spread around Atlanta, Georgia.
Bob and Lou, I hope you have a wonderful day. This has been a lifetime of hard work, and the book is just absolutely wonderful. Thank you for letting Mercer University Press be a part of it. We are thrilled to have you here. Thank you.
Bob, how are you doing? Pete Wellborn here. Long time no see. I clerked at King and Spalding in 1988. My happiest memories of that summer involve you and Lou. I'm also a good Mercer alum, just like you. And as I told you back in '88, when I was at Georgia Tech in college and undergrad, my favorite Christmas gift one year was Lucid Intervals, which is the funniest book I have ever read in my life.
Bob, this is the real Willard, Willard Stembridge, who was not named for Willard Clutchmeyer, but you and I go way back, and I'm really looking forward to the luncheon today and the Mercer Press and Mercer University honoring you. You greatly deserve it. Looking forward to getting a big stack of books signed. Thanks.
1976, when I was working at Mercer, and you've been an inspiration and somebody I admired ever since. And I wish I could do the same for you that you did for Mercer. I just wish you the best and think about you all the time.
You have been the light of my life. You are the funniest, most wonderful, most supportive, most charismatic, most talented man I have ever known.
Bob Steed, you'll never know how important you are to me. 40 years I spent at Mercer, and you were my #1 man. I will always treasure our times together. And I wish you well.
Bob, this is a great weekend to celebrate the best of Bob Steed. Bob, I didn't know there was a best of Bob Steed, so I'm looking forward to reading the book and finding out what it is.
Hi, Bob. I just want you to know that I love you, and I am so happy to be here today. I can't wait to see you. You are a real inspiration to me, always have been. I have every one of your books, and I need to reread them.